Hey, it's Samantha Hartley of the Profitable Joyful Consulting podcast. This season, we're talking about management consulting. And today specifically, I wanted to talk about public relations for consultants, media training, and everything you need to know before you get in front of that camera or in that publication. So I have a special guest today that I'm excited to introduce. That is Susan Harrow of PRsecrets.com. Susan helps CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders multiply their revenue with media interviews by using messaging effectively. For the past 31 years, media trainer, marketing strategist, and martial artist Susan has helped thousands of CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders multiply their revenue with media interviews by using messaging effectively through courses and one-on-one consulting. And she's a black belt in Aikido, so watch out for her. Susan, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. You know, I listen to every single episode of your podcast.
And I appreciate that. I know that there are people out there who may never work with me and who listen. And I'm just delighted to be somebody who has gotten the chance to work with you. So let's start out big picture. We know that what PR is, public relations and things like this. I don't want to mess any with the basics. I want to hear an example of somebody that you've worked with, like a case study of a client and how you took them through the process. So illustrate for us what you do.
Yeah, I love that. I think my favorite client is Dr. Jeannie Hurlburt, and she said she went from geek speak to media speak. And I love that because oftentimes we think that the way that we speak naturally is the way that the media wants us to speak, but it's really like taking War and Peace and moving it into haiku. So it really is a separate skill. And so when Jeannie came to me, she had no PR at all. And within 3 months, she was in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Oprah and Friends, CNN, on and on and on. So it's possible for anyone to start to get media no matter where they are. And the other thing is I always really like to look at, okay, so you get in media, lots of times people stop there. Well, I got here, but it's like, what did you say to inspire your audience to buy or buy into whatever it is that you have? And what came after that? So for her, she got some really big consulting contracts. One was with Tony Robbins. She had already had consulting contracts with the government. She worked on Katrina. She has a research and survey company. But that really expanded her capacity to get these other kinds of contracts. Now, PR doesn't always do that for everyone. Sometimes it's your reputation or your credibility, and later on maybe you get the big speaking engagement or you're the one that they choose instead of someone else. So it's not always immediately measurable, and I want to make that clear because lots of people say, well, I want direct results from PR, and sometimes that doesn't happen immediately, but it's sort of looking at PR in the big picture, in the long term, how it's going to affect your reputation, your sales, your credibility. Yeah. And then I have one other favorite one, if I could,
Absolutely. Two stories is great. So
Yeah.
first of all, yay, I love that one. That's really inspiring that due to this kind of publicity, she was able to get like marquee clients.
Yeah, and then that continues because obviously that's when somebody looks at her website, they say, oh my gosh, she's been quoted in the New York Times, or, for her industry, that's super important, right? So it's whatever publications are or shows are important to you. And then the second one that I really love, I mean, there's so many, but the second one that I really love is Dr. Joanne Dahlketter, and she is a peak performance coach. And I wanted to talk about this because the Olympics just happened. So she was at the Olympics, not this one, but a past one. And she was on NBC 5 times. And her speaking fees went from $5,000 to $15,000. So they tripled. And then the other thing about that is that she filled up her courses. So she has, and so for those of you who have not just consulting, but those signature systems and those courses, this is a great way to do it. And what I loved about what she said is that working with me changed everything. So it shifted her whole business. And then she said, so she said that she was grateful for me to shifting her business and her life. And to me, that's what really great PR does. And that's what media training, the difference of media training makes that PR great. And so you actually are an Ask You Back guest, or you do fill your courses so it has the results that you want. And that's super important to me to have those kind of results.
I love that story. It's super inspiring. I really see that like her appearance on NBC, like other people would see that and be like, oh, well, obviously like she's the go-to person. So
and she also had five goals. I think she had 3 or 5 gold medalist Olympians that she was working with. So that didn't hurt.
That doesn't hurt. Right, exactly.
That's just, that's part of her credibility. That's part of the credibility package that the media is looking for. Like, how are you credible in your field? Like, what have you done that's made you stand out, that makes you already somebody that they want to interview?
Well, and it's interesting because in the first example, you're talking about all these publications that she got in. I'm like, that says to me, she has something newsworthy to say. So what is that? What does that require to be newsworthy?
I think that is really the first thing to look at. Like, do you have something that meets the media's needs and meets their audience needs? So it's not just your audience, but it's the media's audience. So what we're looking for first in a client, and what I'm looking for, and I work with PR firms because they do the booking and then I do the media training. So they book on those particular venues, and then I media train people to their initial messaging and then also to those particular venues, so they can be not only a great Ask You Back guest, but then again, working on how do you want to grow your business? So the first thing that we look at, is it topical? Is there something going on in the culture today? Is there a trend or a topic or a news jack? A news jack is just like something that's just happening, like, today, that we can then jump on and marry to what's going on in the media. So we are looking for, can you talk about things that are relevant? So, today would be parenting, education, mom stress, right? So those are some really super hot topics today that maybe are not going to be hot tomorrow, but once you establish yourself as an expert, then you have that relationship with the media. So when that topic comes up again in another trend or another roll through, you're already connected and have a relationship with the media. So that's how you start to establish becoming a trusted source and a good guest.
I love this idea of being an ask you back guest, because a PR seems so fleeting. Like, well, I don't know, like they call you and it happened once, and will it ever happen again? And how would you know? And I think cultivating the idea of being an ask you back guest is exciting.
It's not only exciting, but know that when you are on like a TV show first, it's a test, it's an audition. And if you don't do well, you're not going to get asked back. So it's super important to have those sound bites or messages down, and also to know how to handle yourself. Now there's so many panels, now we're a lot on Zoom, but sometimes even you're on a Zoom panel, so you still need to manage that. And I had one client, and she was a lawyer, by the way, so she was used to interrupting people, but we knew she was going to be on a panel, and it was on, I think it was Fox. And I said, you need to jump in with something super interesting right away, because then they'll spend more time on you. So it's always best to be first. And then you can take the floor for as long as you want. And then if somebody else is saying something and you want to jump in, you need to know how to interrupt. And that was not so easy. So we role played that a number of times, and then she was on the show and she had some difficulty jumping in.
Oh.
Yes, even though she's a lawyer and we practiced, she says, oh my God, that was so hard.
It's an intimidating environment. Yeah.
It's intimidating. So it does take a lot of practice, but she did it, and she was asked back, and then she said, that is not going to happen to me again. We need to practice that again. And we practiced it again, just to get used to it. And then the next time she was on, jump in, and she got a lot of airtime.
Yay. Okay. So what I hear you doing here is this is media training, because I feel like you introduced me to that term, and I don't know that I was aware of exactly what that meant. But it's like, when you get your shot, like, don't blow it. So what exactly are you doing with media training?
Yeah. So I listen to the way that someone speaks naturally and starts to shape those into stories. And, there's stories, statistics, facts, vignettes, acronyms. So they're really a variety of all of those things. And you want to be able to integrate that seamlessly into the conversation. So the sound bites or your messages are not necessarily the conversation itself, but how do you weave those in gracefully, no matter what somebody asks? So you'll be able to transition to that information. So, you warned me that you were going to ask me about a story first.
Mm-hmm.
But the media is not going to warn you. You need to, whatever question they ask, you need to jump in on a story. And I make media train people for like Terry Gross Fresh Air. And it's like, we know she's going to ask you, you need to jump in with a story when she asks, your first question. You need to be ready. And you can kind of hear when people are. So then the process after that is we create those sound bites, we create those messages, and then we practice them in situ, in the real situation, first slowly, and then we speed up to what the pitch and the pace would be. Radio podcasts are slower, broadcast is faster, Print media is a little bit different, but you need to still be really quotable. And so I train people how to listen to see if they're being quoted and quoted accurately. And then the other part of that is that making that a seamless conversation and then being able to handle anything that happens. So we handle your worst case scenarios and the worst kind of personalities for you too. So any kind of personality, any kind of stuck point, we're going to practice all of those so it's super, super easy when that happens because you've already experienced it. So it's not like, you freeze and you've got in your gut like, oh my God, I'm caught off guard with a question I didn't expect. We can always transition to the information that you want your audience to know. And that's what you're there for. You're there to give your audience something really special that only you can give. And that's the whole point of doing media.
I love it. And also preparing for it. I love the amount of practice and rehearsal and role playing that's happening with that, because I feel like people see people go on TV and think, wow, they speak so fluently. And then when they try it and they are terrible at it, they feel like, oh, there's something wrong with me. When it's like, this doesn't always come naturally to everybody, right?
It doesn't come naturally to 90% of the people, especially not people think, oh, speakers, it's really easy. No, because commanding a stage and speaking is not the same thing as not controlling the conversation. The only thing that you can control is yourself. You master yourself so you can master the media. You're not mastering anyone else or any situation, because lots of times it changes. And sometimes, even with a guest that I had media trained a long time ago on Oprah, we had planned the whole segment. And last second they go, you know what, she was taping for 3 days. We need to go in a different direction. She calls me up on a Saturday like, oh my God, we need like a whole new set of sound bites because we're going in a whole new direction. But really what I want my clients to do eventually is to be able to do that on their own. Like once we've established that and somebody changes direction, eventually I want you to do that yourself. Like, oh my God, you still know how to create those with those templates and those kind of, and it's not all templated because not all stories are fluid, but with those kind of templates, with basic templates, you'll be able to do that on the spot eventually. With practice, like what you said.
Well, yeah, like all good things requires practice. So I hear you using the term soundbite, and I love the idea of sound bites, and I want to make sure that I am thinking of the same thing as you are. So how would you define a soundbite? And when you're prepping someone to go on TV with a specific set of sound bites, what does that mean?
So those are just your key messages, your critical messages. So it's just that they're highly condensed. That's when I said the statistics, facts, all of those are all sound bites. So when you're speaking, you want to have a lot of that at the ready. And it's not about being a robot. I want to be clear, because sometimes you're going to need to say this in many different ways, especially if you're doing a lot of different interviews. We really want you to be fluid and be able to say the same thing in many different ways. So it's not about the memorization. It's about the practice of fluidity. And it's plan, prepare, and practice so you can be free to be spontaneous.
Perfect. I love it. Because I know what it sounds like when you can hear a bunch of people have had talking points and then they say the same thing in the exact same way. And you're like, wow, everybody's on message, but it's kind of more like they're robots than that they are aligned with the brand.
And that loses trust.
Oh,
and boring.
Like you can see through it.
Yeah, you can see through it. One of my friends, she had interviewed somebody for a podcast, a very famous person who will go nameless as a podcast. And she's like, she was so disappointed because she had heard her on an interview and then she went to hear her at a book signing and she said exactly the same things. And she said she lost respect.
Yeah.
So
right. You want to feel that people have ideas and that at least some of this, as you're saying, is spontaneous. So in that sense, like, how do I stay on brand and on message and still sound spontaneous? Are there certain things that you always say a certain way?
Yes and no. I think one of the most important things is to be always looking for new stories and always looking for things that are happening in the news that you can create relevancy for. So when I talked about the topics today, if I did another interview in a week, I might have a new topic to talk about. And or a new story, like tell it in a different way. Something has happened with a new client, for example. And so you can use that story. So always be on the lookout. It's not just your experiences and your expertise or your clients. You're looking at research. You're looking at things that are going on in the culture today that you can relate to whatever's going on in your business. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I love the idea of like, this is what we should be doing, is like pay attention to things that are up and are happening and evolving, you should always be kind of connecting what your message is with what's going on around you. And I feel like this just brings like a little level of consciousness to it so that you're aware that you're doing it, and then you can put it into practice. But
I think that's so true. Like I heard this great in this interview with this woman who I just thought was she had such a great, I went and looked on her website. She had such a great concept of how to like equalize pay. I didn't hear any of it on the interview. I'm like, I don't even know what you do. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
so when you want to get your message out, you really want to, it's for the benefit of all beings, right?
yeah.
It's to get it out so people know what you do, so they can spread the word and engage with you, whatever your goals are.
Well, so I just want to recap this. What are the most important things that we need to do before we even reach out to the media?
So the most important thing is first to have that messaging down.
Yep.
Like, because people do things back asswards, they reach out to the media and then they have their, oh, you know what moment when the media calls.
Yeah.
And then they're caught with their pants down. And one of the other reasons why that's so important is because what you say now, you can never take back. It's on the internet forever. And it's cataloged so everybody can reference it. And we've seen people's careers come down for that, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so now we want to be, so now it's ever more important for your brand and your business to be able to speak succinctly and well about what it is you do. So that's number one. And then the second thing, when you are pitching the media, you want to pitch something that is super relevant to them and their audience. And I think that I can say that a lot, and then people still don't get it because they're talking about them. But it's about you, but it's about where your skills and your topic meets the media. So it's really about them and their audience. And so I think, yeah.
What's a client that you've had that who was trying to pitch something, but they couldn't really connect it to like what other people wanted, and how to make it relevant?
One thing, I don't know that it wasn't relevant, but it was kind of like we were talking about, one of my clients is an NLP practitioner and he has some other higher level. We were talking about his MIR program, which helped veterans and people with trauma. It was very effective in getting over trauma and had been proven in, can't remember which countries. It's like countries like Russia and Czechoslovakia. And we likened that to what like yoga was 20 years ago. It was really hard to explain when Deepak Chopra, and who could, you couldn't hardly even understand him, was talking about what yoga is. So what we did with that is you make a bridge from the past of what somebody knows to the future for what they don't know.
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that idea. Well, and so one of your skills is helping people build that bridge and make things relevant and understandable and clear.
And I think that's a source of imposter syndrome too. I have a very talented client who, a man, so I know we sometimes talk about men don't admit
they're very confident.
But he did. But I shared with him, and I can't share his exact information because you know who he is, but he's very successful, has a multi-million-dollar business, and his topic is not 100% related to his business. And I said, well, let's take all of these skills that you have in running your business and showing how it's going to be running this new business which you're just creating, and let's create that bridge. And then that helped him get over. He's like, oh yeah, I do have those skills. I don't need to be in imposter syndrome. I'm just feeling a little insecure because it's new. And you had a whole thing on new. Yeah. Which I loved. You had a whole podcast on new. It's like, well, wait a minute, this doesn't feel comfortable. No, because it's new. Yeah.
Why should it? But that part of you is irrational.
And media interviews are new for most people. So no matter how skilled you are, when it feels uncomfortable, that's okay. Because, and I said to you, I still get nervous. I'm doing podcasts. The nerves don't. It's just creating that into excitement, shifting it into excitement. But it's not like it necessarily goes away or we try to make it go away. It's just the way it is.
I feel like it's a feeling that's like, I want to be sure I do a good job. And so I'm going to kind of like raise my awareness and my energy level to make sure I do that.
That's exactly right.
So when we're looking like now at the media landscape, and I feel like one big, huge player is podcasts and also online TV shows. How do you feel like this changes the work that you do, or how your clients should regard those, like our podcasts and other than like the huge ones and YouTube TV shows? Are those as valid as like Fox News and NBC and ABC and CBS, or like how do you navigate that playing field?
It's not about rating them as better or worse. It's really, what do you want to accomplish with your PR and what is the best mix? Because sometimes what happens with like a podcast or an online TV show is there can be a more direct route to sales.
Uh-huh.
If it's a very targeted audience,
Yep.
because an audience on, CNN or MSNBC may not be as targeted as a mommy blog or a business blog, right?
Right.
Where
Yeah.
all of those people could be your buyers. So I think it's really looking at, what do you want to accomplish? Are you building your reputation? Are you really looking to score sales? Your book speaking, whatever that is, and
Mhm.
then having a mix of those which are going to get you there, because you probably want those multiple layers. You do want the
Mhm.
respect. So you do get prestige wise,
Yeah.
obviously. It's going to be more prestigious to be in the New York Times and then on a news show or a late night TV show or whatever that is
Yeah.
for
Right.
you than it is to a podcast that other people haven't heard of, that doesn't have name recognition, even if it's got name recognition in your industry.
It reminds me of the difference between publishing with an official publisher and then self-publishing your book. Like it used to be there was one way to do it and not the other, and there's still merit in publishing with an official publisher in that that's huge brand credibility. And a lot of times self-publishing is more profitable and maybe the more direct route to your audience, as you're suggesting. So I really like thinking of them those ways. But unlike in book publishing, I think what you're saying is like that traditional media is really good for brand credibility and brand equity. And then the other things maybe, they may build the equity with your audience, and you're definitely going to
That's a
sell.
great definition. I love that you asked that, because one woman on LinkedIn said, "Well, I'm a digital marketer. I'm successful there. Why do I need PR?" And I
Uh-huh.
said, "Because nobody knows you. You know, I mean, do you want to be nationally known?" As she was like an interior designer, I'm like, "Would you want to be nationally known as an interior designer, or do you want to just stay in the little internet world?" Because the internet world isn't the whole world. I know sometimes we think that it is, but it's a
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the internet world is a very small world too,
Yeah.
even though it's a big world. And
Yeah,
the
well, it
people
feels big
here,
to us because we're a part of it.
yes,
And, I would say like when you came, I met you officially in person. Well, not in person, but you know what I mean? I met you officially virtually. I had known you for many, many years, and you to me are internet famous. And I think for a lot of people, they want to be niche famous, and maybe they want to be anonymous on the national level. But there's plenty of people who are like, no, I don't. I have a big mission, and I want to be internet famous, and I want to be nationally known in my field. So that's, as you're saying, that's what official, like real media can do for you. I say
and I
real.
think the other part of that too is sometimes, people talk about social media, which is completely valid now and is a great big world, but sometimes that kind of fame is instant and fleeting.
Yeah.
So you have something that goes viral or that gets, but it doesn't build your brand in a big way. It may have given you a tiny push,
Yeah.
but unless that's a really pivotal point of your brand, it may just be something that was fleeting fame versus lasting fame. Do you want to really build your business and brand? Then that's a combination of PR traditionally and digitally, and I think that they can be married nicely together.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I also realize that a lot of the people who are influencers or viral or whatever don't know how to monetize that or haven't monetized that. And so to me, I want the consultants and my audience to pay attention to this of like what big business, I mean, what big media can do for you, and then what these other things can do for you. And you have to have your act together from a sales and business model standpoint, so you know how to take advantage of that when it comes along. Just as you're saying, be prepared when
Yeah.
you have a media opportunity. And my very limited experience, when the media comes calling, it's like later today at like 5 p.m. or something like that. It's usually you have to be
It
like
is often
instantly
instant,
ready.
and you just need to be prepared. And that's why you need to have your messaging down too. That's not the time to try to get your messaging down when the media is called,
Nope.
right? But the other thing that I want to say about that is that there is a huge, larger credibility from being on those national shows to anyone who wants those bigger consulting contracts, or they're also looking at just establishing themselves in a bigger way in the business, in the quote unquote business realm, or whatever realm. I'm saying business, but I mean music and all of that whole realm. That is a different kind of credibility than something going viral on the internet that
Yeah.
maybe nobody's seen and somebody saw and it was really
Yeah.
exciting for a minute. Yeah.
And you hope it gets picked up in the actual media, but it doesn't always.
Yeah.
Susan, what is your big dream?
Thank you for asking me that. So, my big dream is to be working with millionaires and billionaires who really have the capacity to change some of the world's most important problems. So, sexual slavery, food insecurity, and gender, but also I think the whole civil thing that's just to all of us getting along. I'm not sure what the word is, but that's really important to me, to treat all people well. And the reason why I want to work with them is because they don't need to go through the laws and the political system in order to implement change.
Yeah.
They have the influence and they have the money to be able to change something, boom, on a dime. And so that is my big dream. And so because they have that capacity to change things in such a big way. And why I bring this up too and recommend that everybody say this in their media interviews, because you never know who is listening. And when you say what your future dream is, what you want, then people can identify that and come and contact you. So I do want to mention Tom Steyer in case he's listening to your podcast, because I would love to work with him. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, climate change is in the news like every single day. And
Yep.
I know it's hot where you are and it's hot and
Mhm.
cold where I am. So it's especially relevant right now. But it's people like him too who are big thinkers, and women who have the capacity. Some people have built .com companies and sold them and now are looking for their like next project and their next love, their next sort of passion. So mention it in every media interview, because you never know where that's going to go or who that's going to find. And that's what I love about PR, is that's sort of the mystery of PR. We like, well, we want instant results, but also this can bring, like when you talk about mindset a lot, try, this is part of your deepest intention. This is part of your big mindset to have those ideas out there. Eventually, I can't wait for the day to call you and say, Tom Steyer has finally called me. Samantha,
I know. I will put in the word. I mean, you never know who knows him.
Yes.
But I think also when you say your why, like I felt your heart open, and I felt us get a glimpse into who you are and who you really are, like beyond your expertise, like what you how you want to contribute in the world. And I feel like that's from a brand standpoint. They always like start with why and all the blah blah blah, and I'm like, yeah, but the big dream is kind of a why, but it's also connecting to a thing that is, maybe some people would look at it and say, well, that's unrealistic or whatever. But I think, as you're saying, when you get that out there, it stretches your potential beyond what your potential would have been without thinking in those really big terms. So it's like, what is your big dream? I don't know, like what's the crazy, crazy big idea? And then we hear that from you, and I feel like, I don't know, that doesn't sound so unlikely to me. I think Tom Steyer could use you.
I think he could
Certainly
too.
the earth
And I
could.
already have millionaire clients, so if there's a stepping stone to that, and I have some that, like one of my clients is looking to industrialize hemp. That is going to revolutionize the economy, the
Hmm.
energy, and the environment.
Yeah.
So to me, that's not one of my biggest, loves or drives, because these other
Hmm.
things are more like people oriented. But I mean, when we look at what we need now and
Yeah.
where energy is going and the climate and everything, so that's really important to me to help him move forward with that agenda.
Awesome. I just love it. So Susan, where can people find out more about you? And is there a certain program that you would like to share?
So prsecrets.com, and we are in the middle of rebranding. We're almost done. So there will be a program called the Zen of Fame, Your Genius Gone Viral, up there
Yay.
for those of you who would like to take a course, or you can work with me one-on-one personally. But there's lots of free things there, and I suggest everybody start with the 100-word email that can get the media to call you to learn how to be succinct and pitch the media quickly. And there's a lot of other free things on prsecrets.com for you.
Yay. And you on LinkedIn are amazing. I'll put all of Susan's social links in the show notes, but Susan's LinkedIn is amazing. She shares like these PR tips in these short, wonderful videos. And I just at least follow her, if not connect with her, so that you can see these videos, because they're super informative and really interesting. And I think when you watch them, what happens for me, Susan, is I feel like, oh, I do that sometimes. And let me watch. Can I be more succinct, as you're saying? And can I bring a story in here, and how to make this more relevant for my audience? So I super love those tips that you share.
Thank you.
And thank you for all. Thank you for all you have shared with us today. And on behalf of Susan and me, I'm wishing everyone a profitable and joyful consultancy, and maybe a little fame and PR as well.
Me too. Bye.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to get video updates. Thanks.